thing on the list is slippery elm bark. Slippery elm, it's like the cure-all, right? Slippery elm is a natural supplement I suggest all pet owners have on hand because at one point or another, you're going to need it. Slippery elm bark is derived from the inner bark of the Ulmus rubra tree, and it's an amazing thing to feed if your pet is dealing with some GI upset. Once slippery elm bark is in your pet's GI tract, it begins to stimulate mucus secretion, which in turn creates a protective barrier within the stomach and small intestines. Luckily, I haven't had to use slippery elm often, but if any of my pets experience loose stool, a little slippery elm bark always saved the day. Well, this is just so backward because, why not do the right thing? Why not remove the cause of the problem? Why not just allow the gut to rest? Because anything that stimulates mucus secretion is causing the body to protect itself from some harmful influence. Mucus isn't free. It's not something that the body just gives up and doesn't have to worry about replacing. It does that for a reason. The barrier that is created may prevent certain acidic substances from making contact with the body, but it will need to be discarded. This barrier will need to be discarded, and the mucus will have to be regenerated, rebuilt. The supply of mucus will have to be rebuilt from fluids and other resources in the body. And when this slippery elm stuff is eliminated from the body, that's a burden. It's going to burden the organs of elimination with its, disposal. Stimulation is never work. Sometimes holistic practitioners will refer to stimulation as assisting or facilitating the organs that they're supposed to work on, but that always means stimulation. And whenever there is stimulation, there always has to be a compensation phase. There has to be, you stimulate, you work, you get tired, you rest. That's the most obvious explanation or example of stimulation and compensation. So we're making an organ work harder, in other words. And I succumbed probably about 15 years ago to a holistic practitioner's recommendation that I give herbs to my cat who was suffering sickness because a neighbor was feeding him kibble on the sly, and I hadn't put two and two together and figured out he needed to stay inside in order to stay well. But he got very sick, and the holistic vet gave me some herbs for him that were supposed to help the liver. And I gave them to him, and he immediately got worse. He immediately got worse. So anyway, that's all I have to say about that. The next one on the list, the last one on the list is psyllium husk. And she says, quote, speaking of the stool, something else that is helpful for the gut is psyllium husk. This is a soluble fiber that's great at bulking the stool while also promoting regularity. What I'm basically saying is not only can it relieve diarrhea by bulking up the stool, it can also relieve constipation because a bulked up stool will trigger the bowels to begin moving it along. Some raw-fed pets also struggle with expressing their anal glands because their stool isn't as bulked up as it used to be while on commercial food. So psyllium husk really comes in handy with bulking it back up. I've never had to use it for this issue, but I've had to use it a few times when my cat Tangy was a little backed up. And on the topic of cats being constipated, cats do not defecate frequently. My cat defecates probably 2 or 3 times a week. So, if your cat's backed up, I don't think cats really, I don't know, maybe if a week goes by and your cat hasn't pooped, you might want to worry a little bit or do something like that. But a lot of times when people say that their cats are constipated, it just means that they haven't seen them go to the bathroom every day, and cats actually don't go to the bathroom every day. But I think we need to be careful even with dogs, assuming when they're constipated, because very often people will say their dogs are constipated because they see the poop's moving out slowly. And I think that's normal. My dog's poops are very slow. And while they're happening, while she's going, it might look like she's straining, but she's not. I think they just move out of the body slowly. I think that's just the nature of the beast. But when the owner wants to loosen things up, all they have to do is add more lean meat to the diet. And that's the truly natural way to address the problem. Now, when it comes to loose stools, adding more bone typically solves the problem. If it was plant foods, then putting something like psyllium husk in with your plant foods might work, but I don't see that happening very often with plant foods. I see it happening with meat. And when it happens with meat, there are things that we can do besides putting something like psyllium husk with the food. And I can't really go along with it for the anal sac issue either, because RMF includes lots of foods that bulk stools up besides bone. This gal is a raw feeder. She's a raw feeding advocate. And so she's just feeding meat to her dogs. And in RMF, there's no reason to add more insoluble fiber, which is what psyllium husk is, for the purpose of, creating bulk for the anal sacs, because we have plant foods for that purpose. And just a reminder, insoluble fiber is the kind that the body can't use. It just goes straight through. The fiber that you eat is the fiber that you poop. Insoluble or soluble fiber is different. And it used to be hypothesized that the lack of insoluble fiber is why so many Americans, or people who eat the Western diet, were constipated. But what's not generally realized is that our natural diet doesn't include a lot of insoluble fiber, but it does contain lots of soluble fiber. And that just means it dissolves in water. And just adding that to the diet in the form of the natural sources of soluble fiber, like fruit, and getting rid of the foods that have neither kinds of fiber, will definitely solve the problem.